Should the United States go to war in this this Israel-Hamas fight? Should the United States help Israel in their fight? There are many in the United States who have the wrong answer to this. And I'll just tell you, there's a right and a wrong answer to this. The U.S. has been helping Israel for decades, and we provide about $3.8 billion annually so that Israel can defend itself. And Israel is a very modern state. They have a very modern military. They have a very large and well-trained military to take care of their national security. They are capable of handling their national security. They were very much surprised by this Hamas attack. They were totally caught off guard of it and embarrassed and suffered a lot of casualties, both militarily and in their civilian population. And they were understandably upset. There's no question about that. But being surprised does not mean that they're suddenly incapable and that they need the United States to come in. I'll just tell you point blank, America's overriding national security imperative in this is to prevent the war from escalating beyond the Gaza Strip. We definitely do not want there to be a regional fight because everyone loses if that's the case. And I'm talking about our allies lose. It would be bad for Israel. It'll be bad for the United States. It could be terrifying. Could be horrible bad for the United States, maybe even for, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, some other of our other friends, Kuwait. It could be bad for everybody if this thing escalates. Now, that should be self-evident. It should be obvious that we're trying to curtail our military involvement in the area because our national security efforts, our security interests are not at stake in the Middle East that our normal posture can't easily handle. No one threatens the United States that we can't handle with the existing force structures and force levels that we have in the area. We do not need to have a new war. Now, that should be self-evident. It should be obvious the U.S. doesn't want to get a war. But that's not so obvious when you listen to what some of the senior ranking people, certainly former officials, have been saying recently, that they're either oblivious to the potential for what they're advocating that could cause us to get into a war, or they're so arrogant that they think it doesn't matter what the other side's going to do because we're big and powerful and they don't count. And that's desperately wrong. First of all, let's start both of these clips are from yesterday. One is from the former vice president of the United States, and the other is from a former four-star general. First, let's see what Mike Pence said on Fox News last night.
I'm very heartened to hear some of your guests say that Israel is today focused on hostage rescue. I'd hoped that President Biden would direct Joint Special Operations Command, our Delta Force, our Navy SEALs to work in close proximity with Israeli Defense Forces because we've got Americans that are held hostage. And I respect at least the reporting that just happened on your broadcast that there's a focus on getting our hostages home. But I think we ought to be making it clear that with Americans in harm's way, with our cherished ally Israel suffering this brutal assault and now hostages being held, that we ought to make it clear to Hamas that they either turn them over or we're coming in and we're coming in hard.
Okay, that briefs well. That sounds really tough, and I get it. Pence is running for president, so he wants to sound tough. But that's terrible policy because there are consequences for actions. And again, Israel has the military capacity to take care of their security. And they have hostage negotiation teams. They have very well-trained hostage release teams, special forces, basically. So they are trained to do these kinds of things. They've done it many times in their history. So they're probably better at it than we are, and we're pretty good at it. But just because an American citizen is involved doesn't mean we need to go everywhere in the world that is and go in hard because, especially in this case, there are consequences to this. Now, I believe about 24 hours ago, some of the Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon have emphatically said that they're going to stay on the sidelines of this unless the United States gets involved on the ground in the war against Hamas. So if that happens, they're claiming that they're going to open up a second front against Israel and literally attack from the north. Now, that's significant because of what Iran has said subsequent to that. And they have said that their red line, they're going to stay out too, unless the U.S. gets involved on the ground, and especially if it's Lebanon, their client organization in there. But that seems to be oblivious to some people, or they don't seem to be aware of it or don't care, because Jack Keane then also yesterday said this.
Their number one proxy in the world is Hezbollah. If they get into the fight, I hope we've already told the Iranians that we will respond in kind to you. if your number one proxy joins this fight. I would have liked the declaration to be made public, but I can understand there's value also in doing it privately, so somebody doesn't have to call a public statement like that, a public declaration. But I've got concerns, Brian, whether the administration is doing that at all.
Look, go in and hit Israel. We're going to come after, obviously, hit Iran. We're going to come after you. Does he not understand that that means that there's a region-wide war? Because we've already got Israel fighting for their lives in Hamas, in the Gaza Strip. Now that if you add a northern flank to Israel, so now then they've got a two-front war on their hands, and now then you want to make it a three-front war to bring in Iran into that, and that could potentially bring Syria in as well. Now, any one of these we can handle with no problem. In fact, they are deterred. They're deterred right now. They're all saying we'll stay out of this as long as it stays in the Gaza Strip. That's our interest too. But if we say no, we're going to get involved in the Gaza Strip, and then if Lebanon comes in, we're going to get involved with Hezbollah, and then of course if Iran doesn't like it, then we're going to go after them. So now then you're picking a fight and basically choosing a war that could result in American forces being killed first and foremost. So right now, there's no threat to the American forces scattered throughout that region. You start taking this arrogant, presumptuous activity, and now all of a sudden you're putting them in harm's way, and some of them will definitely be killed. Because guarantee this, Iran knows exactly where our troops are in Syria. They know where they are in Iraq, and so do a lot of these other Islamic fundamentalist terrorist organizations. And people who are already against us, but they're restrained right now because they don't want to find themselves in our crosshairs. But if all of a sudden all of their men are our crosshairs, now then they can all act because they can overwhelm our capacity in the region, just like they overwhelmed Israel in that initial attack with Hamas there. So you do not want to get in a new war with Iran. They will be contained because they're not coming after us unprovoked. They're not going to, because they know they can't go toe to toe. But if you force them, if you attack them, then they're going to respond. Any nation would. So this is a very, very foolish act and a foolish policy that these so-called experts are advocating. And I just want to make sure one of the reasons we have this deep dive channel is because we want people to understand what's beneath the surface. And unfortunately, guys like this live on sound bites. And I'm sure that the former vice president is probably sharing this, his tough talk last night. And I'm sure General Keane is wanting people to, know he sounds tough. But look, that is foolish because it could harm our interests. We do not need a war. We need to prevent war, and we need to keep it contained in the Gaza Strip. We're going to continue to be talking on this subject, and invite any of your friends to this channel and share this with them, because everybody needs to know that although it sounds good on the surface, sounds tough, it's bad for American policy, and we do not need war. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next episode.